Sharon and Liz, thanks for both being here today as we try to figure all this out. It's a pretty crazy world at the moment. I know that you guys both got a lot that you want to share around pain. I know there's a lot of heartache out there. I know a lot of people have lost jobs. I know a lot of friends can't socialise. There's a lot of isolation. There's a lot of just pain in general.
There's a lot happening, isn't there?
There's heaps.
Yeah.
So why don't you kick us off, Shaz? Why don't you share a little bit about why we need to face a little bit of sadness?
Yeah, well, Jesus kind of summed it up really beautifully, didn't he? When he said, blessed are they that mourn, because then they can be comforted. And this is a really, really traumatic time.
It's insane.
You know, this is trauma, and we're living trauma. It's not like it's post-trauma. We are all living trauma, and there's a certain amount of trauma every day. I mean, you saw that on Friday with our beautiful youth. They're trying to put all the pieces together, aren't they?
Yeah, on Friday night we had such a great night. Like, it was 11th hour that we said, youth is definitely on. But all the youth came, and there was such a spirit of connection. I don't know how else to describe it. Like, all these kids that normally don't really socialise or be together even though they're in the same room, there was just this outward desire to connect and do community, which is just so cool.
Yeah, but it's also symptomatic of what's happening, how they're processing what's actually happening.
Yeah.
So we do need to process pain, and it is a season for sadness, and we need to acknowledge the sadness and sit with the sadness. And Lizzie, maybe you can sort of share some moments of some of the sad you've been through, because there's a little bit there, isn't there?
Layers. Yeah, there's been lots of layers.
And it would be easier to trivialise it or minimise it, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So what's happening?
What's happening? Well, I should actually be in Melbourne today. Lockie and Jemima have got first engagement party on this weekend.
Jemima.
Hey, love you. And so should be on a plane tomorrow. We should be cooking and getting ready for the engagement party. So that's not happening. And then there was another engagement party here next weekend, so that one's not happening. Yeah. Then the weekend after that, my dad turns 80, which is very significant.
It's a big milestone.
It's a big milestone, and all the family, we're all planning on going up to Sydney and having dinner on Friday night. So that one's not happening. So so there's sort of those party things and times of getting together as family, and so they're all gone. And then in that, one of my daughters has got she's on medication that suppresses her immune system, so she's had to pull out of uni this week because hers is a real face-to-face course, so she can't do that. So, dealing with all that loss and sadness, and then you're talking to business owners who are closing down, and with the Tailrace, and what's happened here in our very busy cafe at the moment. It's just, there's just lots and lots of layers of sadness. Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah, it is hard.
Have you been tempted in that to minimise?
Yeah, it's really easy to go, so-and-so's worse than I am, or that's worse than I am. And I was talking to Lockie and Jemima, and a friend of theirs is supposed to be getting married, and the reception venue rang them up and said, we can't do your reception. So then they've moved it to another date, and then now that can't happen either. And then I find out today that even what they thought they could do this week isn't going to happen. And so you've got all those plans and honeymoons that have been booked and cancelled. And so it's easy to go, well, that's really bad. And I know Lockie and Jemima were like, well, that, it's not as bad as what that one is. And it's like, but yours is sad too. You're allowed to be in that place of sadness and recognise that what you've lost is significant as well. And, Dad won't, I don't know how many more birthdays Dad will have, It was like...
It's real.
So when do you do all those things again? Yeah. And even, you don't even feel like you can plan for another one.
Yeah.
Like there's that, normally if something gets cancelled, you can go, okay, well, we'll do it. But you don't even feel like you can do that. So it is really easy to minimise what's going on and the loss and say, that person, it's worse than I am, or it's going to be okay. But I think it's really important just to stay in that space and actually recognise that there is loss and identify that loss and live in that space so that you can work through it well, rather than just suppressing it or, pretending it doesn't matter when it really does.
Yeah. We've noticed that this week, haven't we, with people where they've lost a job or their business is closed, and there's been this attempt at positivity, which is great.
Bravado, isn't it?
But yeah, I don't know what it is. Well, I do, but it's it's just our difficulty to embrace sorrow, isn't it?
Yeah.
We find it hard to go there and to embrace that sorrow.
What? So someone that's much younger. Sorry, guys. So if people don't go there and if they don't process that, you use the word sorrow or sadness, I think is a word that I would probably use. If people don't process that, like, what happens? What happens to that hurt? What happens to that pain?
Yeah, well, a beautiful counsellor says that the flight from sorrow leads to the loss of hope.
Can you say that again?
The flight from sorrow leads to the loss of hope.
Yeah, it's good.
So if we don't embrace our sorrow, it means that the sorrow is living in on the inside of us, taking up space, and it has to get out at some point. And if it doesn't get out, what it does is it clogs up our brain, it clogs up our soul, it clogs up our heart, and it's always there. It's always there until it's let out.
Yeah.
And it has to be let out. And when it's let out, when our sadness, the Bible calls it lament, when we do our lament, when we just let it out, it means that God can come and he can comfort. But it rewires our entire system. It rewires us physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually and soulfully. And then hope can come in and we can start thinking about things in a genuine way that's positive. So it's really important because we just cannot. Jesus said, if you don't mourn, if you don't admit your sorrow, I can't comfort you because you're in denial.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
You won't allow me to enter into those spaces that only I can actually enter in and be Emmanuel, God with you. It's not that he can God doesn't always solve everything, but he is always with us. He always attends to our soul. So it's really powerful.
So Liz, just playing off that then, so you just spoke about a lot of pain that's been in your life over the last, recent history, I suppose. Your sad case.
Yeah.
No, but like, is what Sharon's been talking about, has that been a reality in your life? Like, have you felt that, I suppose,
Has she gone there?
Yeah, have you gone there? Let's be real.
Have you cried your tears?
I have cried lots of tears, need a lot of eye cream at the moment, I feel like. I feel like I've allowed myself, and, when you get to 51, you've had a few years under your belt to sort of go, hey, this doesn't
51?
work. I know. You thought I was 55. That I love that verse that Sharon mentioned about, those who mourn will be comforted. But if you look at the other way, those who don't mourn won't be comforted.
Yeah.
So for me, over the last couple of weeks, there's been lots of, staying in that space of sadness and not thinking, okay, we've just got to get up and get on with it and, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Sort of that hasn't worked. So I have done lots of things that I've just tried to attend to my soul and attend to what's going on. So listening to, great music that has spoken to my soul and uplifted my soul, but also spoken to the sadness that's there. And so Amazing Grace is one that just always in times of trouble is just one of those songs that just speaks to me. There's another song by Hillsong that I've been listening to, which is Another in the Fire. So knowing that, somebody else is there with me in the pain, that they're not just going, okay, you've got to get out of this. They're just there with me. Lots of journaling, lots of reading the word. And sometimes, when you're sad, sometimes you read the word and it doesn't say what you want it to say, but it's still the word and you still read it. And more often than not, there's something in there that will just speak to my soul. This week it was Joshua, and there were parts of Joshua that spoke really strongly to me, but then we're also in Corinthians, and there were parts of that just spoke to where I was at. It's that, living, breathing word that comes from the Bible, which it's not stale, it's not the same every day. It actually speaks to where you're at. So
it's good.
Lots of things in that space, and
You've also been very real where, when we've asked you how you're going, you'll say, I feel sad.
Yeah.
I just feel incredibly sad. So you'll own it, you'll name it, you'll give it a name.
Yeah.
And
is that the hardest part?
I think it is hard to name it. I mean, sometimes some people don't know what their feelings are unless you give them a flashcard. The kids love the emojis. But sometimes we're not really aware, and we might call it fear, or we might call it anxiety, or we might call it frustration. But a lot of it is just sorrow. It's just sadness. And I'm sad for Australia, let alone all the individual bits, you know, to watch people's dreams. And who would have thought that as a nation we would be going through this? And then the world in itself as well, you know. It's just sad to see what's happening.
So either of you can answer this. What do you think our wider community will look like coming out of this crisis if people don't handle this pain very well, if they don't acknowledge sadness and name it for what it is?
Well, we're in what I think is present stress trauma.
Okay.
So we've all heard of post-traumatic stress disorder. If the sorrow isn't dealt with, we will be a community that is walking with a lot of sorrow still in our heart and soul.
Yeah.
And it is a traumatic event that we're going through. So if we don't allow God to minister to us and to heal us, on the other side we're just going to be carrying a lot of pain, which will come out in all sorts of different ways that are unhealthy.
Yeah.
And like, it's not like you have to sit and wallow in your sorrow.
No.
It's amazing how quickly you can actually go through it if you name it, and if you actually cry the tears that you need to, acknowledge what it needs to do. And music's amazing the way it ministers to us. It's the one time our entire brain lights up, and so every part of our being is being responsive. So it's very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned a song just before that's really spoken to you during this season. What was that one again?
It's by Hillsong, Another in the Fire.
So what we might do is we'll put that in the show notes, and then people can access that as well. But as you're listening to that, like, what did that experience do for you? Do you know what I mean? Can you explain that to us?
Well, I love music, and it does, you know, what Sharon talked about, that speaking right into your soul and lighting up all of you. And it was just, it just enabled me to identify, I think, the feelings I was in and be validated that I'm not the only one in this space, that I'm not the only person who's going through sadness, that if I look throughout history, there's been people in the same space and they've owned it and they've worked through it. So it was just a song that just allowed me to enter into that space and I don't know how to explain that, but
It's peaceful.
Yeah.
I think that when you attend, not everything can be fixed or controlled, but everything can be attended to. So we can attend to what's happening in our soul. And when we do, I think that the thing that comes is peace and release. You're no longer carrying a burden.
And it's not like it's fixed or everything's better.
No.
It's just that there is that. Yeah.
And there's mystery. And I think that's the hard thing for us. It's hard for us to we want to figure out, well, the mechanics of sorrow and healing, but there's mystery there. There's mystery in terms of what happens when I embrace, and then how I might come out of that space. And we can't really explain what happened or how it happened. All we know is that our heart has been comforted and somehow we've been healed.
That's good.
So we have to live with the mystery of it.
That's good. As you can't control it.
Well, God doesn't like to be controlled. He doesn't like to be put in a box, does he?
I don't think so.
No.
So earlier you guys mentioned that you see a lot of people minimising the pain or the heartache. I assume that's just as much a personality style or a defence mechanism that some people would lean on than others. Can it look like other things? Like, is it always minimising, or could it be denial, or could it be, do you see people blaming?
Blaming's one. Just that classic fight. You know, we either fight. So we've seen that in the supermarkets. I mean, that's people's reaction to sorrow, to trauma. So that's their bodies, their minds. They're going, I can't cope with this. You know, I'm out of control. My rhythm's gone. I don't know what's happening. But it's sorrow. It's sadness. It's grief. The life that they have known is being threatened. So they go into fight or they go into flight. So we've seen a lot of people flee into isolation very quickly and be very very stringent, I suppose, around that.
Yep.
Or they go into freeze where they just can't make decisions. They are overwhelmed by the information. And I've had numerous conversations with people where it can come through in terms of, do I take my child out of school? Do I leave them in school? And they're frozen in their decision making because it is a complex thing that we're dealing with. None of us have dealt with this before. But a lot of it's just sorrow and sadness and the trauma of what's happening. So it comes out in lots of ways.
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
Did you guys have any other questions for each other at the moment?
No.
I don't think so.
Cool. So let's just quickly talk about how we can sort of apply this a little bit.
Yeah.
So you've already touched on a few things that you've done. So you talked about journaling and quiet time and just owning it, for lack of a better word, I suppose, and listening to that worship music. Is there anything else that I've missed in there that was helpful for you?
I've also tried to, I guess, stick to some of my routines this week as well.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that.
Yeah, so because this, I guess, my personality, I can probably enter into the sadness and stay there and what's going on. So one of the things I've tried to do is stick to routines as well this week and try and, I guess, keep some normality to life. I don't know if that is just about sadness or just about how to deal with what's going on. So I've attended to relationships as well. My natural tendencies is to probably withdraw and get quite vigilant. So one of the things I've tried to do is to stay in some of those relationships that I can. I've got some friends that I walk with. We do that in a different way. So I guess
Meet you around the block.
Yeah.
A virtual walk.
So let me be my thing.
No, you're fine.
Music, reading, prayer, exercise, and relationships. They're probably the...
Yeah, that's great. You've spoken a little bit about structures this week. Do you want to...
Yeah, so
comment?
it's because our structures have all gone, just our normal routine, even of going to the supermarket, and just being able to purchase what we would normally purchase or our rhythm of being able to go in and not encounter, say, aggression or, say, somebody at the service desk who's upset because somebody's just abused them. So even going to the supermarket is a different routine and a different experience than what it was, say, 2 months ago.
Yeah.
So all the routines have changed, even like we usually go to Curves. Yay, shout out to Curves. And now we can't do that. So now our exercise rhythms change, but even just the rhythm of seeing people who we say hi to and who we genuinely enjoy doing life with. So there's so much change, and it's really important to keep rhythm because we need structure. Our brain needs structure, our body needs structure, our life needs structure. We need control. We are control freaks. God made us that way. And he did that because it's also a way, when we're controlling life and have those rhythms and structure, it's a way in which we express our gifts and our ambitions and, that core purpose that he's called us to. And so for a lot of us, we don't even know how to express that anymore. And how long is it going to be? Like for me, how long is it going to be till I can hug someone? That's really, really hard. But those routines are just so important in this season of trauma and grief.
Yeah.
So some little things can really help, like, cooking meals together at a set time, cleaning up together, and then having board games or jigsaw puzzles rather than just always being about Netflix and switching off. Or,
it's good.
Still going to the park as a family. Those kinds of things.
Check that you're allowed, but sure.
It's very easy to...
Setting up a supermarket in your pantry and pretending, maybe.
So the structures are important.
That's good. So I know that you guys have put a little bit of time into creating a resource for everybody going away from this to be able to apply it. So you've created a little attachment with a handful of reflection questions, and you're encouraging our church or anybody that's watching this to just take 10 minutes of quiet time and just reflect on those questions to try and name up sadness, name up that pain, and to begin that healing process. Is there anything that you'd like to speak into with that little exercise that you guys have drawn up?
No, I mean, it's good to spend time getting rid of our worries and our sorrow. Dallas Willard often says when you ask someone how they're going, you're really asking about their bothers, what's bothering their soul. So it's good to be able to write those down, but then it's good once you've dumped that to focus on something else because it's got it out of the system. So then it's good to kind of come back and go, okay, well, what can I control? What can I do? What can I express? And I think that's where the hope comes back in. See, once we've embraced sorrow and dealt with sorrow, we're then fully ready to embrace hope and the creativity that hope brings. Because there is another side to this, and there is a God who loves us, who's walking with us in the middle of this, but there's an end point to this. There's another side.
Because sadness is sort of almost like a gas. It just keeps expanding if you don't deal with it. It's like it feels like it consumes all of your head space and your heart space if you don't deal with it. But once you've dealt with it, it's almost like you contain it.
It's like a balloon.
Yeah.
And
you can, and then you've got space for the other stuff.
Yeah, so it's good. So
good.
So there's some exercises there for people to do.
Yeah, so they'll just find that attachment in the notes again as well. Which would be really, really good.
And then we're going to do a Q&A as well.
Certainly are, on the Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah.
4 o'clock?
Yeah.
4 o'clock. So we're going to do a live Q&A on the Facebook Tailrace community page, not the group, but the page. And so you guys are going to be interacting on there, which will be really fun, really cool. So we're encouraging anybody that's got questions to submit those in the comment section here to do so, or any other way that you can get them to us, so pigeon or whatever else. Is there anything else that I've missed?
No, that's about it.
That's great.
Lizzie's just going to read a beautiful psalm, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is Psalm 23, and it's one that, just always speaks to my heart. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen.
So good. Well, on that note, we might leave it there. So Sharon and Liz, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jono.
And we'll talk on Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah, do you want to just pray for everyone?
I suppose I could do that. You can
even leave your eyes open.
What? All right. God, I just want to thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to talk about things that are real. And I'll just pray for everybody that's listening to this, and even those that aren't, that you help us all just become a little bit healthier, that you help us to deal with the pain, to name up sadness. And I just thank you that you will come and comfort us in that. Amen.
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 Thank you.
Thanks.